Hello, I am Mike.
Hello, I am Lily. Welcome to English Podcast Flow.
Today's episode is English Small Talk Mastering Everyday Conversations. We'll be exploring how to navigate those casual chats that are so crucial for connecting with people, especially when you're speaking English. You know, those seemingly simple exchanges that can sometimes feel like a linguistic tightrope walk.
Absolutely, Mike. It's like there's this hidden code to cracking the casual conversation. And today we're going to decode it together. We'll delve into some surprisingly effective phrases and strategies that can help you feel more comfortable and confident in those everyday interactions, whether it's at a coffee shop, a party, or even just chatting with your neighbor.
I think a lot of English learners underestimate the importance of small talk. They focus so much on grammar rules and vocabulary that they forget about the art of simply chatting. But here's the thing, small talk is the gateway to deeper conversations. It's how we build rapport, establish connections, and signal that we're open to interacting. Think of it as the warm-up act before the main event.
That's such a great analogy, Mike. It's like you wouldn't just launch into a complex presentation without first introducing yourself and setting the stage right. Small talk is that crucial introduction, that initial spark that ignites a connection.
Right.
And it's especially important when you're learning English because it gives you a chance to practice your speaking skills in a low-pressure environment.
Exactly. It's like dipping your toes into the conversational pool before diving into the deep end. And you know what I've noticed? Even native English speakers sometimes struggle with small talk. It's not always as easy as it seems.
It's true. There's a certain art to it, a delicate balance between being engaging and respectful, finding common ground without getting too personal, and that's where having a few go-to phrases and strategies can make all the difference.
Let's start with the basics greetings. You know those simple phrases we use to acknowledge someone and signal that we're open to a chat? Our research highlights some classic ones like, how's it going, what's up, and how have you been? But what's interesting is that even these seemingly straightforward greetings can have subtle nuances depending on the context and the relationship between the speakers.
That's a great point, Mike. For instance, what's up is super casual and best reserved for close friends or people you have a relaxed relationship with. Imagine using it with your boss or a professor unless you have a very informal dynamic. It could come across as a bit too casual and even disrespectful in certain professional settings.
It's like using a slang term that only insiders would understand.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, how have you been suggests a slightly higher level of interest and is more appropriate when you haven't seen someone in a while or want to express genuine care for their well-being. It implies that you're not just passing by with a quick hello, but that you're actually interested in catching up.
Precisely. It's those subtle distinctions that can make a big difference in how your greeting is perceived. And it's not just about the words themselves, but also how you deliver them. Your tone of voice, facial expressions, and body language all contribute to the message you're conveying.
It's so true. You can say the same phrase with different energy and it completely changes the meaning. Like, how's it going? Can sound genuinely interested or totally bored depending on how you say it.
Exactly. It's all about that genuine connection, that spark of interest that makes the other person feel seen and heard.
Yeah.
And, you know, one thing that I find fascinating is how cultural context can influence even these basic greetings.
Oh, tell me more about that. I'm all ears.
Well, in some cultures, for example, it's considered polite to inquire about someone's family or health as part of the initial greeting.
Oh, wow.
It's a way of showing respect and genuine care for their well-being.
Okay.
But in other cultures, that level of personal inquiry might feel intrusive or overly familiar, especially in a first encounter.
That's so interesting. So it's not just about learning the phrases, but also understanding the subtle cultural nuances that surround them.
Absolutely. It's about being culturally sensitive and adapting your communication style to the context and the people you're interacting with.
Now let's move on to another classic small talk topic, the weather. It might seem a bit cliche, but there's a reason why it's so popular. It's universal, it's easy, and it's a safe way to break the ice without getting too personal.
It's true. You don't need to be a meteorologist to comment on the sunshine or the rain. And what's great is that it can be a springboard for further conversation.
Okay.
For instance, if someone mentions that they're enjoying the sunny weather, you could ask them if they have any outdoor plans for the weekend or if they have a favorite park or outdoor activity they enjoy.
That's a great tip. It's like using the weather as a starting point to explore other shared interests or experiences. And you know what I find funny? The way people talk about the weather can actually reveal a lot about their personality.
Oh, absolutely. Someone who complains about the slightest drizzle might be a bit more on the pessimistic side, while someone who finds joy in a rainy day might have a more introspective or artistic nature.
It's like a little window into their worldview. And speaking of worldviews, this brings us to another fascinating aspect of small talk: cultural differences. We touched on this briefly with greetings, but it really permeates every aspect of casual conversation.
It's true. What might be considered a harmless comment in one culture could be perceived as offensive or inappropriate in another. For example, in some cultures, it's perfectly acceptable to ask someone about their age or marital status,
Wow,
while in others, those topics are considered very personal and best avoided, especially in initial conversations.
that's so interesting. It's like navigating a social minefield. So how can English learners avoid those cultural faux pas and ensure they're communicating in a way that's both respectful and engaging?
Well, one of the best things you can do is be observant and ask questions. If you're unsure about something, don't be afraid to politely ask for clarification. Most people are happy to share about their culture and customs if you approach it with genuine curiosity and respect.
That's great advice. It shows that you're willing to learn and adapt, which is a valuable skill in any language.
Absolutely. And remember, even native English speakers make mistakes sometimes. The key is to be open to feedback, learn from your missteps, and keep practicing. The more you expose yourself to different communication styles and cultural nuances, the more confident and adaptable you'll become in your interactions.
I like that. So we've talked about greetings and the weather and even touched on the importance of cultural awareness. But let's dive into some other go-to small talk topics that can help you connect with people on a more personal level. What about asking about someone's day? It seems simple enough, but are there ways to make those everyday questions sound more genuine and less like a robotic script?
That's a great question, Mike, and you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah,
It's so easy to fall into a pattern of asking those stock questions, how was your day? What did you do today? Without really engaging with the answer. But the magic of small talk lies in that genuine connection, that spark of interest that makes the other person feel seen and heard.
so how do we inject that spark into those everyday questions? I know I've been guilty of asking, how was your day?
Yeah.
While simultaneously checking my phone. Not exactly the recipe for a meaningful exchange.
We've all been there, Mike. But one of the most effective ways to make those questions sound more genuine is to be present, to really listen to the answer and respond in a way that shows you're actually paying attention. It's about active listening, not just waiting for your turn to speak.
Active listening, that's a term we hear a lot, but what does it actually look like in practice?
It's about being fully engaged in the conversation, not just passively absorbing words.
Right.
It's about making eye contact, nodding, and using verbal cues like, that sounds interesting, or I can imagine, to show that you're following along.
So it's about showing that you're not just hearing the words, but actually processing and responding to the message.
Precisely. And here's a little trick to take it a step further. Try to follow up with another question based on their response. For example, if they say, my day was pretty hectic, I had a lot of meetings, you could ask, oh, what kind of meetings were they? Or what industry are you in? It shows that you're not just going through the motions, but that you're actually curious about their experience.
I love that tip. It takes it from a surface-level question to a more engaging exchange.
Yeah,
And that's how you turn small talk into, well, bigger talk.
exactly. It's that natural progression from those initial pleasantries to a more meaningful conversation.
Right.
And speaking of connecting on a deeper level, one of my favorite small talk topics is hobbies and interests. It's a fantastic way to find common ground, discover shared passions, and even learn something new.
Absolutely. People light up when they talk about things they're passionate about, whether it's gardening, photography, cooking, or collecting stamps.
Yeah.
And even if you don't share the same hobbies, you can still show genuine curiosity and learn something new from their experience.
It's true. And that curiosity is key. Even if you know nothing about someone's hobby, asking questions shows that you're interested in learning more about them as a person.
Right.
And that can go a long way in building rapport. You could say something like, I've always been curious about pottery. What is it about that craft that you find so fascinating?
Those are great examples. It's about finding those points of connection, those sparks of shared interest that can ignite a conversation. Now let's tackle a topic that can sometimes feel a bit trickier at work and school. It's something most people have in common, but it can also be a conversational minefield, especially in casual settings.
It's true. You don't want to bore someone with overly detailed work talk when they're just trying to relax and have a casual chat.
Right.
And on the flip side, you don't want to come across as disinterested or dismissive if someone asks you about your job.
It's all about finding that balance. Our research mentions phrases like, how's work going? And what do you do for work? Which are perfectly fine as starting points. But I've definitely been in situations where people launch into a 20-minute monologue about their job.
Yeah.
And I'm just politely nodding while trying to figure out how to escape.
I've been there too, Mike. The key is to be mindful of the other person's cues and the overall tone of the conversation.
Yeah.
If they seem genuinely interested in hearing more about your work, then by all means share your passion. But if they're giving you those subtle hints that they're ready to move on to a different topic, like checking their watch or glancing around the room, then it's probably a good time to steer the conversation in a new direction.
So how do you gracefully redirect the conversation without coming across as rude or disinterested?
You can acknowledge their question and offer a brief, engaging response without diving into the nitty-gritty details. For example, you could say, "It's been keeping me busy, but I'm learning a lot. How about you? What do you do for fun?" It's a way of politely shifting the focus from work to something more lighthearted and personal.
I love that. It acknowledges their question without getting bogged down in work talk.
Right.
Now let's move on to a topic that's always a good conversation starter: plans. It's a great way to find out what people are up to, discover shared interests, and even make plans to hang out in the future.
It is, and it injects a bit of positive energy into the conversation.
Yeah.
Everyone loves talking about things they're looking forward to, whether it's a weekend getaway, a concert, or just trying out a new restaurant.
Our research highlights phrases like, "What are your plans for the weekend?" Or, "Do you have any fun trips coming up?" These are classic conversation starters that can lead to all sorts of interesting discussions. I'm personally really excited about this cooking class I signed up for next month. I've always wanted to learn how to make pasta from scratch. What about you? Any exciting plans on the horizon?
Well, I'm actually planning a trip to the mountains with my family next month. We're going hiking and camping, and I can't wait to disconnect from technology and enjoy the fresh air.
That sounds amazing. I love hiking. You know what's great about talking about plans is that it also opens up opportunities to invite others to join in.
Yeah.
If someone mentions they're going to a movie you're interested in, you could say something like, "Oh, I've heard great things about that movie. Let me know if you'd be up for going together sometime."
That's a great way to subtly suggest hanging out without being too forward. It's casual, open-ended, and doesn't put any pressure on the other person. Now let's address the elephant in the room, the conversational quicksand that we all dread. Awkward silences. They're inevitable.
Yeah.
And sometimes they can feel incredibly uncomfortable, especially when you're still getting comfortable with speaking English.
Those awkward silences. I used to think they meant I was doing something wrong, that I wasn't interesting enough, or that I had somehow messed up the conversation.
I think we've all felt that way at some point. But here's a little secret. Awkward silences are perfectly normal and can even be beneficial to a conversation.
Wait, really? Tell me more. I'm all ears.
Think of it this way. A silence doesn't always mean the conversation is dead.
Oh.
It can simply be a natural pause, a moment for both people to gather their thoughts, process what's been said, or simply enjoy each other's company without feeling the pressure to fill every second with words.
I never thought about it that way. But what about those times when the silence feels truly awkward, like you both run out of things to say and the energy just fizzles out? What do you do then?
There are a few strategies you can use to handle those moments gracefully.
Okay.
One is to simply acknowledge the silence with a bit of humor. You could say something like, "Well, this is comfortable," or "I guess we've covered all the important topics like the weather and our favorite breakfast cereals."
I love that. It breaks the tension and shows you're not taking things too seriously.
Exactly. Another approach is to ask an open-ended question that invites further discussion. You could say, "So what have you been up to lately?" Or, "I've been meaning to ask you about." And then bring up something you genuinely want to know more about, whether it's their work, their hobbies, or their travel plans.
Those are great suggestions. And I think it's important to remember that small talk is a two-way street.
Yeah.
It's not about performing or trying to impress anyone. It's about engaging with the other person, showing genuine interest, and creating a comfortable and enjoyable conversational space.
Absolutely. It's about connecting even in a small way. And sometimes those small connections can lead to something much bigger, a new friendship, a business opportunity, or even just a shared moment of human connection that brightens your day.
And in this final part, we're going beyond the basics, those foundational phrases and topics we've already covered, to uncover those subtle nuances that can truly elevate your conversations from pleasant to memorable.
It's like we've mastered the basic steps of the dance, and now we're ready to add some flair, some personality, those little touches that make it truly captivating.
Exactly. And one of those subtle yet powerful tools that can transform your small talk is body language. We've touched on this briefly before, but it's worth diving a bit deeper because those nonverbal cues can speak volumes, often conveying more than words alone.
It's true. Our body language is constantly communicating whether we're aware of it or not.
right?
It's like a secret language that reveals our thoughts, feelings, and intentions. And when it comes to small talk, those nonverbal signals can make or break a connection.
So what are some body language tips that can help us project confidence, engagement, and approachability in those casual conversations? I know I've been guilty of crossing my arms or fidgeting when I'm nervous, which probably sends the wrong message.
We've all been there, Mike. But one of the simplest yet most effective ways to project confidence and openness is to maintain good posture. Stand tall shoulders, relaxed head, held high, as if you have an invisible string pulling you gently upwards. It might sound a bit cliche, but it really does make a difference in how you feel and how you're perceived.
It's like embodying that sense of confidence, even if you're feeling a bit shaky on the inside.
Exactly. And speaking of confidence, eye contact is crucial. It shows that you're engaged, interested, and present in the conversation. But be careful not to stare.
Right.
Aim for that sweet spot of maintaining eye contact for a few seconds, then glancing away briefly, then back again.
Oh, okay.
It creates a sense of connection without feeling too intense or intrusive.
It's like that saying, the eyes are the windows to the soul. We can communicate so much with just a glance, a twinkle,
Right.
a shared moment of eye contact.
Absolutely. And don't forget about the power of a genuine smile. A smile can instantly disarm people, make them feel more at ease, and create a more welcoming atmosphere for conversation. It's like a universal sign of friendliness and openness.
But what about those times when you're feeling shy or nervous? Is it okay to fake a smile, or will people see through it?
I think it's more about finding that inner spark of warmth and letting it radiate outwards.
Okay.
Even if you're feeling a bit nervous, try to focus on something that makes you happy, something that brings a genuine smile to your face, whether it's a funny memory, a favorite song, or even just the thought of a delicious meal.
It's like channeling your inner happy place. And speaking of channeling, let's talk about the art of humor. I think humor can be such a powerful tool for breaking the ice,
Yeah.
diffusing awkwardness and creating those shared moments of laughter that bond people together. But I knew it can also be tricky, especially across cultures where what's considered funny in one context might fall flat in another.
It's true. Humor is like a cultural fingerprint unique to each society and shaped by its history, values, and worldview. What might be considered hilarious in one culture could be perceived as offensive or inappropriate in another.
Right.
And even within the same culture, humor can be subjective, with different people finding different things funny.
It's like navigating a comedic minefield. So how can we use humor effectively in our small talk without accidentally stepping on any toes or bombing with a joke that falls flat?
Well, one tip is to start with observational humor.
Okay.
Those witty comments about everyday situations or shared experiences. For example, if you're waiting in a long line, you could say something like, I guess everyone had the same idea today. Or, I wonder if they're giving away free coffee at the end of this line. It's a lighthearted way to acknowledge the situation and create a sense of camaraderie with those around you.
It's like finding the humor in the mundane, those little quirks of everyday life that make us chuckle.
Exactly. And another tip is to be mindful of your audience.
Right.
What might be funny to your close friends might not be appropriate for a first encounter or a professional setting. It's always a good idea to err on the side of caution and avoid humor that's too edgy, sarcastic, or potentially offensive.
So it's like tailoring your humor to the context and the relationship, just like we do with our language and body language.
Yeah, precisely. And if you're unsure whether a joke is appropriate, it's always a good idea to test the waters with a subtle comment or a playful tone of voice.
Okay.
If the other person responds positively, then you can feel more confident about injecting more humor into the conversation. But if they seem uncomfortable or confused, then it's probably best to steer clear of that particular brand of humor.
Just like reading the room, gauging the energy, and adapting accordingly. And speaking of adapting, let's talk about the power of storytelling. Stories are such a fundamental part of human communication, a way to connect, share experiences, and make our conversations more engaging and memorable.
It's true. Stories have this magical ability to transport us to other worlds,
Mm.
to evoke emotions, to teach us lessons, and to create a sense of shared humanity. And even in the context of small talk, those little anecdotes, those personal snippets of our lives can add depth, interest, and connection to our conversations.
So how can we weave storytelling into our small talk in a way that feels natural and engaging? I'm not exactly a Shakespearean orator, but I'd love to spice up my conversations with a few well-placed anecdotes.
Well, one tip is to keep your stories short and sweet. In context of small talk, you don't want to launch into a lengthy saga that rivals War and Peace. Aim for a concise anecdote,
Okay.
a little vignette that illustrates a point, sparks a connection, or simply adds a touch of humor or personality to the conversation.
So it's like those little amuse-bouche appetizers, those bite-sized bursts of flavor that tantalize the palate and leave you wanting more.
Exactly. And another tip is to be mindful of the relevance of your story.
Right.
Make sure it ties into the conversation in a way that feels natural and engaging, not forced or random.
Okay.
If someone mentions they love hiking, you could share a funny anecdote about a hiking trip you took. Or if someone's talking about their favorite book, you could mention a book that had a similar impact on you.
Yeah.
It's about finding those conversational threads and weaving your stories into the fabric of the conversation.
It's like creating a conversational tapestry. Those interwoven threads of experiences, observations, and stories that create a richer, more textured conversation.
I love that image, Mike. It beautifully captures the art of weaving storytelling into our small talk, creating those moments of shared humanity that make our conversations so much more than just an exchange of words.
And as we wrap up this epic exploration of English small talk, I think it's important to remember that it's an ongoing journey, a process of continuous learning, adaptation, and refinement. There's no magic formula, no one-size-fits-all approach. It's about finding what works for you, experimenting, and embracing those inevitable moments of awkwardness as opportunities for growth.
So true, Mike. And remember, the most important ingredient in any conversation, small or large, is that genuine desire to connect, to
Right.
share, to listen, and to learn. Embrace those opportunities to engage with the world around you, to step outside your comfort zone, and to see each interaction as a chance to expand your horizons and enrich your life.
Beautifully said, Lily. And on that note of connection and enrichment, we'd like to thank you, our wonderful listeners, for joining us on this conversational adventure. We hope you've gleaned some valuable insights, practical tips, and perhaps even a few laughs along the way. Remember to keep practicing, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep those conversations flowing.
Thanks for listening to English Podcast Flow. We'll catch you next time for another exciting adventure in English communication.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow and reach more English learners like you. By subscribing, you'll never miss a new episode, and by liking the video, you're letting us know you want more helpful content. Thank you for your support. It means so much to us.